is the debacle inside this Republican National Committee. That is the formal power structure of the National Republican Party. And they are in trouble over the now failed effort, there's the building, to see them try inside that building to hatch a plot to scuttle the remaining 48 state primaries. It's a bid by Republican elites to kneecap the Republican voters that exist throughout the whole country and that they will need in November, and all to try to stop any potential long primary waged by Nikki Haley against Trump. Now, you may recall, we've touched on this story. MAGA allies were floating an RNC resolution that tried to declare Trump basically the nominee to put a thumb on the scale before the rest of the votes come in. There's, of course, only been one primary. Now, they've backed down from that in public, but new reporting suggests the RNC chair's call was well received by Trump aides. And now tonight, reports are that one of the top-ranking House Republicans is pushing basically the same discredited message as the RNC did, but this time trying to corner Trump endorsements in the House by arguing that it is all over. The National Party's entire purpose and their requirement is to empower the party's voters, whether it's Democratic or Republican in this country, right? It could be any kind of party, but to empower the voters to choose nominees. Now, if they fail to do that, they fail to be a credible party. And how can you even have primaries sponsored by an institution if they, in public, are rigging things? Now, when Hillary Clinton had allies who did far less than this busted RNC plan, but they were caught privately pushing against Bernie Sanders' candidacy, that caused major strife at that year's Democratic convention.
Some of those protesters throwing a coffin over the fencing into the restricted area.
Can I just say to the Bernie or bust people, you're being ridiculous.
Excuse me. Excuse me.
Hundreds of Bernie Sanders delegates walked out of the conventions.
It went on like that, and if you want a full, deep history, there was more than one issue at play, to be sure. But a big part of it was the anger by the actual evidence that some people inside the DNC were unfair. That came out later, and I'll remind you of it, but that was, by any evidentiary standard, very small compared to what the RNC's chair, McDaniel, now admits to trying to do in public.
I'm looking at the math and the path going forward, and I don't see it for Nikki Haley. I think she's run a great campaign, but I do think there is a message that's coming out from the voters, which is very clear. We need to unite around our eventual nominee, which is going to be Donald Trump.
Do you have actual knowledge and awareness that he pushed the RNC to do that and then pulled back?
The people that pushed it are his people. At the end of the day, this is not about the RNC. This is about the American people.
Haley blaming Trump, it's his allies doing it. And what you heard there from McDaniel was the height of MAGA elitism. You can say there's a part of MAGA that's people out in the country and holding normal jobs, doing normal things, and you can debate their ideology. But there is a growing and pernicious set of beltway, hypocritical, anti-democracy MAGA elitists. And they have cushy jobs, and they rotate through the beltway just like anyone else, and they have to make sure Republican voters and other people who have other ideas about what they think MAGA means don't find out how crooked they are, to use one of the terms that Donald Trump used to use. Remember, Trump only has 32 delegates thus far. There has been one full primary and one caucus. Haley has 17. You need over 1,000 to secure the nomination. So when these MAGA elitists come out and tell their own voters who are waiting to participate in the process that the Republican Party created for the purpose of choosing delegates, they are in a pinch. The voters here are being iced out by the MAGA elitists. This is Republican war. Think about it like this. The D.C. plan for the Republican Party was to undercut an estimated 60 million or more people who would potentially vote in these scheduled primaries based on registered Republicans. Now, there are many stories in politics that are about red versus blue or right versus left. This is not that kind of story. Now, some of Trump's backers may argue, well, they represent a certain wing of the party, and this is all about that. But this Republican chaos is, as I'm emphasizing to you, and the reason why it's a top story, it is something that is very important to understand. And if you're a Republican voter that wants an honest primary system or wants your vote to count, well, now you're learning another layer of how this anti-democracy agenda undercuts you, even if you didn't care about it as much, perhaps, when it was red versus blue. This is red versus red, elites versus everyone else. And the reason the RNC backed down so quickly is that, one, they don't want the story to continue to be out there and get covered. Well, sorry, we're going to cover the facts wherever they lead. And two, they already know what a damaging and hypocritical look this is for the RNC MAGA elitists to be in. And that includes even with potentially Trump-leaning voters, to say nothing of the other Republicans out there who clearly welcome this primary because they're open to choices beyond Trump. Just as a not negligible, not 0% of the first two states where Trump had all of these advantages still saw a pursuit of other candidates. We saw that in Iowa, and we saw it in a major way in New Hampshire with Kornacki at the big board showing how many conservatives and independents and some Republicans were open to Haley. Maybe that does scare Trump so much that he's willing to at least try to see if he can short circuit this thing. Now, these kind of internal party fights are important in politics because they really can take on a life of their own. It was those foreign-hacked Clinton emails I mentioned earlier that revealed how some Democratic staffers privately seemed to mock or even agitate against a then candidate in their party's primary, Bernie Sanders. It seemed that some of them preferred Clinton. And the party is supposed to be an honest broker during the primaries, not having people deriding or worse the candidates. Now, those were private emails by some staff. They were not the party chair publicly trying to end the primaries and say, as McDaniel did, well, we got one primary voted, so we kind of know everything that's going to happen. It wasn't the party taking a position to scuttle 48 primaries and then declare a magical nominee. The RNC was just caught doing that. The Clinton-Sanders race, whatever happened between those two candidates, of course, went much longer. It didn't involve that level. But even with the hints of unfairness by some of those Clinton allies, those hints caused the uproar and then a swift move for change. The Clinton allied party chair of the Democrats had to resign amidst that convention week.
Debbie Wasserman Schultz is talking about her party's hacked emails that forced her to step down as chair of the DNC.
No question to any objective observer's mind that the DNC was supporting Hillary Clinton, was in opposition to our campaign.
Donna Brazil's book suggests that the campaign, that what the Democratic National Committee did, meant this election was rigged. Yeah, I think it was.
Part of the leadership of the DNC at that time that heavily favored the Clinton campaign.
Those were the concerns, and as I mentioned, there was some valid evidence on that. Your memories may depend on how much you followed it or which candidate you might like, but even Republicans claim they were outraged by all of this. Take a listen to Trump.
The whole thing we're going through, Bernie Sanders, it was a rigged deal. The whole thing is one big fix.
She basically bought the DNC and she stole the election from Bernie. So that's what you ought to take a look at.
Donald Trump seized on that because he knew those were politically viable attacks. People don't like things they consider to be a fixed process, whether that's at work or in politics. And the draft resolution is obviously fixing it. Now, Trump may be extra vulnerable here because he has so often publicly claimed to be against the RNC playing these kind of games. And he also tried to stake himself in a position of outsider, saying he wouldn't even necessarily vow to support the nominee who won the RNC process.
Is there anyone on stage, and can I see hands, who is unwilling tonight to pledge your support to the eventual nominee of the Republican Party and pledge to not run an independent campaign against that person? Again, we're looking for you to raise your hand now. Raise your hand now if you won't make that pledge tonight. Mr. Trump.
Mr. Trump. Now, he tried to argue that showed that he was against the D.C. deals and RNC business as usual. Now you see that he and his allies are against democracy, even among Republicans. So again, forget the red-blue thing for a minute, and you can see they just don't want to have Republicans get a say unless they support Trump, which is a sort of a cultish thing. Now, there have been all sorts of predictions, including across the media about how long this primary can go and whether Trump is on his way to winning. And the truth is, nobody really knows. Just like nobody knew what was going to happen in 2016. And a lot of people got the midterms, red fizzle 2022 wrong. And a lot of people didn't know just how big that anti-Roe backlash would be. Predicting elections is difficult and should probably just not be done. But remember, those remaining delegates, they could flock to Trump. Sure, that's possible. The rules also favor a frontrunner. These RNC rules that Trump likes. But something could shift, or Trump's legal problems could continue to metastasize. Haley has shown strength in New Hampshire, strength at the exact type of coalition that many Republicans think they would need to win in November, and a surge in donations that, of course, can continue to fund a long battle. She's holding on to her big donors. And many effective campaigns take time. We heard from James Carville recently reminding us how Clinton struggled and was down and out and then came back to second in New Hampshire. If you're old enough to remember the last election cycle, 4 years ago, Biden was fifth in New Hampshire. He was completely counted out by a lot of these same prognosticators, and he came back, won the nomination in the presidency. And as for Haley, well, she is using what is not yet a long campaign, a short one, 2 states, and already sharpening her message in ways that clearly may affect Trump, his standing among Republicans, his standing in the country, or may even win people over to her side.
Are we really in this country going to have 2 80-year-olds running for president? It is a fact that when you are their age, you have mental decline. I don't care who you are. You have mental decline. He didn't just get me confused. He mentioned it over and over and over again. He's not what he was in 2016. He has declined.
Not only has he declined, she argues, but if there is a fair, open, long race, he will keep declining.
Sex. Relinquish what remains of the Allspark.
So who is the insect? You? What? Who's the insect?
Protect you. They will defeat it on our world, and we will defeat them here.
And this was just a diversion.
Security teams bring up.
Rabbit, she's already inside. Deeds. Give me an update on that reserve. Boss readiness. What was his name? What was it?
Evac, sir.
She's right in front.
We are facing a heavy, sustained attack. They appear to be after the All-Star craft.
Stand down.